This is Coda Radio, episode 36 for February 11th, 2013. You're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
7 years ago, someone hacked my Rails app.
Uh-oh, I have a feeling already I know what this episode's going to be about, right out of the gate.
Yes.
Well,
luckily, that's not true, but yes, that is what it's going to be about.
Oh, well, all right, good. So we're going to talk a little Ruby today, huh? Now, you actually teased this last week, didn't you?
Yes, this is the first time I've actually delivered on a tease.
Oh, so now you're throwing people off. Now I don't know what to expect. I'm all over the place.
It's all lies and propaganda, right?
Wow.
Computer, what happened?
I don't know, Jean-Luc. So, of course, we're going to talk, what? We're going to discuss Ruby today? What are we talking about?
We're going to discuss Rails, not necessarily Ruby.
Okay.
We're going to try and avoid the FUD and take a nice neutral position on it. As the listeners will know, I've actually been quite the fan of Rails. But for various reasons, I've been moving away from it.
You've actually built an entire cooking application in Rails, and it's quite popular, used by Gordon Ramsay, correct?
Sure.
Oh. I thought maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
I eat too much chicken.
Oh, of course. Yes, my Ruby on Rails chicken deep fryer.
Right. Well, before we jump into that, should we start with the feedback?
We should.
All right, let's do it.
So I woke a sleeping giant in Canada, not Alan Jude. The BlackBerry fans have struck back. They do exist. They really like BB10, and they think it's going to be third or second in the market.
See, we thought this might happen. Now, this actually is interesting because we don't really have this happen so much when we talk about Firefox OS. We don't really have this happen when we talk about Windows Mobile even. I mean, we get some response on Windows Mobile, but nothing like this, right?
We get some response. We do get responses, but far less upset. And I think the reason for that is I'm fairly optimistic on Windows Mobile, where I'm pretty pessimistic on BlackBerry, and I think you are as well.
I'd say that might. I don't know if I'm optimistic on Windows Mobile, but I'm probably...
No, but you're pessimistic on BlackBerry. And I think that people tend to respond to negativity rather than optimism, let's say.
That's true. What I can't get around fundamentally is, to me, it seems like we have developed into a two-product world. We have Coke,
right.
Pepsi, Verizon, AT&T, and then there's always tertiary players and even, fourth and fifth tier players, but it's almost like they just don't even matter when you compare revenue and market impact. And it's just like that in every single category that exists that gets mature.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to recover this whole thing, because we covered it. If you're interested and you missed last week's, take a look at last week's episode. But one nice thing was Stanko, whose name I just butchered, but I thought that was a good accent, shares his free BB10 game, and I put a link in the show notes.
Right on.
To the BB app world, or app store, if you will. It looks interesting. Unfortunately, I don't have a device that can run it, so I haven't been able to try it, but give it a go.
It seems like I mentioned last week, the biggest shot they have, just to wrap my thoughts since I was just negative on it, is it just seems like if there is somebody who's going to have a third place shot, it could be BlackBerry, just because they know how to do this. They know this market. They know mobile. They know how to work with carriers. They know how to produce hardware. They have, relationships across the board in all these areas. So they're way ahead of guys like Canonical and Firefox OS.
Well, certainly, yeah. And the enterprise play, and I think that's a strong market for them.
And really even more far ahead than Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft's their biggest competitor in this regard, but, in terms of actually understanding the mobile space, I think they have Microsoft beat there.
Perhaps. It's going to be interesting to see what both companies do this year. I would be willing to bet that this year is kind of do or die for Windows Mobile, and I know, don't email me, I know it's called Windows Phone 8 now, and BB10. Wouldn't you agree? I don't think if they don't succeed this year, I don't think they can actually succeed at all.
If it was anybody but Microsoft, I'd say yes. Microsoft could literally just hang in the game until some other company just decides they don't want to be in that market anymore.
Yeah, but given their track record, if they don't succeed within the first year, year and a half, they'll kill the product and reboot it,
Maybe.
especially in
Yeah.
mobile.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and BlackBerry's kind of been doing the same thing. I mean, they keep the same name, but the OS has evolved quite a bit. So I mean, to
I
the
actually
BlackBerry
think that's where
fans,
they have another edge up, BlackBerry. I think QNX is a very solid choice for a mobile operating system.
rather than Windows, the Windows 8 core.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's going to matter too much to purchasers, but yeah, again, we're getting into crystal ball territory. Nobody's going to know because also the segment of the market that's going to buy these two products is motivated by very different things than the consumer market.
Right.
And my biggest flicker of hope for BlackBerry, as many of you emailed me, is the security. Even if it's true or not true, they have a reputation for being incredibly secure.
Yeah,
So,
actually, I don't know actually
yeah.
why that is. I know they have some good encryption systems, but I've actually had to do a lot of fixes on BlackBerry enterprise servers that have
Well, a lot of
security
it
issues.
was versus the old Java feature phones. They were far more secure.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
But reputation sometimes matters more. And yeah, I really don't want to spend too much more time on this
Okay.
because it's all crystal ball stuff. Obviously, I don't wish ill to any platform. I'd like them all to do well because, frankly,
You can make money on all of them.
right, an equally divided market is good for developers.
Right, right.
A two-horse race is not great. A one-horse race is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, almost a 2-horse race is almost really just as bad as a 1-horse.
Right,
In a
'cause
lot of ways.
2 isn't great. I'd really like to see 3. 4 would be, happiness.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
But moving right along, Sean writes in, he's interested to know how we feel about writing his init scripts for his Linux server in Python. Additionally, now I almost didn't put this in, Sean. He asked me to share the code. He has it on an open Bitbucket repo.
Really?
So please, I haven't looked at the code yet, Sean. I hope this goes well for you because there are plenty of trolls in the world. But yeah, I don't have an issue with it, Chris. This is kind of more your ball game than mine, but
No, as far as is using Python, the only thing that you do is you do set some level of barrier because then every admin that needs to use that
right.
has to know Python. But as long as that requirement is met, it's not a big deal.
I mean, the more traditional choice would have been Bash.
Yeah, right.
But I don't see this as a huge.
I would be curious to know what Bash is not doing in this case that Python could do.
Well, so I truncated his email.
Okay.
The main reason is he's more comfortable in Python than Bash.
Well, I mean, if you got to get the job done, you got to get the job done.
Right.
As long as your fellow coworkers or future coworkers that replace you can manage it. So document.
Python's kind of becoming relatively ubiquitous now. And I know that's kind of a contradiction in terms, but I don't really do any Python, but I can read Python. And understand what it's doing. I mean,
Yep.
I think it's a safe choice. Now, had you said, "Oh, I wrote them in Haskell," well, yeah, might be a problem. I mean, some of mine are in Ruby.
The biggest, I tell you, the biggest thing, anytime you write something in a language that I can read it with my eyeballs, you're generally okay. What really stinks is when I sit down at a place and some guy has made a custom binary to do something and it's completely opaque. I can't open that up in a text file and figure out what it's doing by reading it, and I am left without any tools other than just to troubleshoot what maybe weird issues this thing has. So I really, honestly, Python, Bash, Perl, whatever you might use, as long as it's readable and documented and commented,
I think you're fine. Like, don't use one name, one word, one letter, variables, things like that. To me, this is a non-issue, but that's probably because I also do it myself.
Comment and add rationale and timestamps in your comments, and then somebody coming back through later on can reconstruct what your logic was.
Well, one thing he's also done is he has the scripts and source control, which every commit has a comment.
Nice.
So if you can see the whole change log. So I think that's
nice.
Yeah, I think you're fine. If you're working for somebody, make sure they're okay with it. But I mean, isn't Python now pre-installed on most? I know it's pre-installed in Ubuntu, correct?
Yeah, I suppose I don't know. I don't actually know for sure if you're doing just the server install.
I have no idea. I just spun up a server, an Ubuntu server this week, and I didn't pay attention to what was pre-installed.
So much of their stuff is Python based, but I'm not positive of just the base install.
I ended up just running a script to to configure the thing, so I have no idea. But well, it was my script, but we'll talk about that maybe next week.
Now that's a tease I don't know if we're gonna ever see come through.
Yes, because it could mean anything. So Michael, not me, writes in to tell me that the current version of NetBeans is a pretty awesome tool for Java, JavaScript, and a number of other languages. Fair enough. I haven't used NetBeans in approximately a lot of years.
Yeah.
I don't remember the last time I opened NetBeans.
Definitely been around a long time.
Yeah. So I can't really speak to it.
Cross-platform support for multiple language, rich set of community-provided plugins.
It's still open source and free from when I took a quick. I mean, it looks very impressive. It's cross-platform. They seem to. Traditionally when I used it, it was a big Java tool.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. But it looks like they've branched out from there because they're pushing that they can do PHP and C and C++.
I'd say give it a look. Having said that, most organizations I've worked with use Eclipse if they're a Java shop.
Yeah.
Which I don't particularly like, but the newest version isn't bad. So if it works for you, Michael, it's great. And if somebody's looking for an IDE, I do remember back in the day liking NetBeans better than Eclipse. So if that's anything.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have probably, when they think of NetBeans, they think of like your experience, the older version. But on their site, on the netbeans.org, they actually have an RC download for 7.3, which is looking pretty sweet.
And to be fair, back then lots of IDEs were janky. So hell, Xcode is still janky. So just
Boy, they're really up in the HTML5 and JavaScript stuff in the new version of NetBeans.
Everybody is. Even IntelliJ has a lot of it now. Huh. It seems to be their new hotness.
Yeah, their major features, their JavaScript editor is significantly improved. So yeah, go JavaScript, way of the future.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, so that was the feedback, right?
That was the feedback. Very short this week.
People need to email us, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
They do need to email.
Are we light on emails this week?
We got a lot of the BlackBerry emails.
Yeah.
So I think what's happening is if we say something
is particularly polarizing.
Yeah, everybody disregards the remainder of the show and kind of just...
That's understandable. It's an hour-long show. There's a lot of territory we cover, so if something stands out. But, maybe as you're going, folks, start a draft. So that way we have stuff to chew on, because we love a lot of feedback. So email us, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Okay, so we have some hoopla, and this is me just trolling Chris. So anybody who wants to join in the IRC chat, I would really appreciate it.
All right, okay, all right.
So the Ouya, the console that Chris says doesn't have a chance.
Oh, you got to go to the Ouya right off the bat.
It's going to have an annual release. That means every year you're getting a new one. And how much is that going to cost, Chris?
I believe it's $99 each time, so they say, right?
That's right. $99 or less. Miss Julie Herman? I said her name, right?
All right.
Says if she could do it cheaper, she'd do it cheaper.
Of course they would. Now, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard them say. Of course they would. Of course they would.
Well,
that's like Amazon saying if we could make the Kindle cheaper, we'd make it cheaper.
Has Apple ever said if we could do it cheaper,
we'd
do it cheaper?
I didn't say Apple, I said Amazon. This is their model. They're taking the Kindle approach.
This is not their model. This is the future's model. Give away, what is it? Give away the razor, sell the blade, or something like that.
So, first of all, I think a yearly update is smart. I think in practice, it's going to be people are going to skip every other release. I think is what's going to be in practice.
Which is exactly what happens with smartphones, and I can tell you from experience, all you do is you support one version back, and that's it.
Yeah.
So this is cloning the smartphone.
I think it's interesting too that the controller is half the price of the unit. The controller is $50. So if you want another controller, you almost have to spend half the price of the Ouya. So they're obviously losing money on the main unit.
Yeah, and to be honest, the first mock-ups of the controller I think look better than the actual product. Or the actual controller, I should say. Mm-hmm. But I'm still really excited about this. People who follow me on Google Plus will know I backed it, so I have one coming in the mail whenever the hell they get around to it. And I also purchased another one or pre-ordered another one on Amazon.
Yeah, as did I. I pre-ordered mine.
Yes. So I'm going to have a dev machine, because I'm sure I'm going to hose it, and a one hooked up to my what do you call that thing?
TV.
Magic Box TV. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously am a little critical of this thing, but
Well, you don't hate it as much as you hated the Nexus Q.
no, I mean, I bought one. I would not have bought a Q.
Yeah.
I did not buy a Q. But for $99 at this price point, it's worth trying, even if it's mildly interesting. It really only has to be more compelling, slightly more compelling than a few other devices. And if it were to, like, say later on, integrate Netflix streaming and maybe, other live type stuff like that, then I could just hook it up in place of a Roku box.
Are you ready for an atom bomb?
Yeah.
There's limited shelf space on my entertainment center because it's one of those cheapo ones. It is replacing the PS3 when it comes.
Wow. What if it doesn't do Netflix?
Well, I have an Apple TV and Xbox, and
Okay. Oh well. Okay.
yeah. But still,
hmm.
I'm telling you, this device is going to be awesome.
I'm more likely to buy a bunch of $5 apps than I am one $60 app.
Exactly. Because there was a great article this week written too. At $5, what the hell? Why not try it? At $60, that's a tough sell.
And I either have to be in the store or shopping on Amazon for it, where with this device, I can be in my TV in the mood to get a game right now.
And I just want to address what Guyver saying in the chat. So he says, why not just stream from your Android phone to your TV rather than buy an Ouya? The reason is pretty simple. Joe user doesn't know how to do that.
How would you do that?
I don't know how to do that, to be honest. I know how to do it with an iPad.
I have a stock Android device, so there's no like DLNA media server that runs all the time in the background on my Android device to manage that for me.
And it's really interesting. They've secured some serious retail partnerships. They have Amazon, which is probably going to be their best one. They have Best Buy, which shows they have bad taste. I mean, what? They have, aren't they in Walmart now too? There's a few other stores. GameStop is the one I'm thinking of. I mean, this is going to be in the consumer's face. I can definitely see parents buying this for their kid rather than a $500, ridiculous PS7 or Xbox 3000.
Oh, totally. This for parents could be huge. I wonder if they'll do parental controls and stuff. That might be interesting too if they could filter out, bad content for children.
I'm sure they will. Maybe not at launch, but they will. Well, in their terms to the developers, pornography is not allowed, flat out. So there is going to be no adult section of the store.
And the other thing we just have to keep in mind is they almost have to ship an update next year because in June, a quad-core Tegra 3 with 1 gig of RAM that's already low specs today. Because the Tegra 4s, and you've got minimum 2 gigs of RAM on modern devices that are running Android. You've got, probably a better GPU than what this thing has in it. It doesn't actually state, but I have to imagine this thing's going to be already hurting for an update when it ships.
All right, let's just, for kids, how many kids played on the original regular Nintendo?
No, come on, that's awesome.
The Atari.
I know, but the problem this thing has is it's still married to Android. So all the other Android devices are already ahead of this thing that are shipping this year. So game developers are writing to those.
Okay, I'm not. So fair play. I'm writing directly to the Ouya.
Well,
my bet is that this is going to be a device that retro gamers and thank you, you're killing me here. Retro gamers and parents of children buy because it will have the equivalent power of like an N64.
I think this is a monetization device where developers can take the risk on Android and guarantee that they'll at least make a few sales on this, so they're going to make sure they have a decent port for it. This is the Android device where you don't have to worry about fragmentation. That's all this is I think this is a fragmentation insurance policy. And that way, I'm going to write for Android, I'm going to write for the Nexus 7, I'm going to write for the Nexus 4, I'm going to write for the S3, but at the end of the day, I'm probably going to make, 20, 30, 40% of my revenue on the Ouya, so I'm going to make sure I have a decent port for that too. And I think that's probably where it's going to get the majority of its games from, at least the big ones.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of games like Shadowgun that were big on Android that are just going to be ported to the Ouya, sure.
Right, and the original classic Android games that have been around for a while that are well liked, they're going to play great. But what about the next big Android title, like Temple Run 4, that maybe has a lot of 3D acceleration stuff? And
okay, if there's a Temple Run 4, I'm going to cry.
Well, there's already been two.
Oh God.
I don't know, but do you see how maybe that could be an issue where the Android market, because it is moving, it's not like the iPhone and iOS market where they rev it once, maybe twice in a year, and
I
you
think
don't
you're
have these.
drastically overestimating how stakeholders and developers approach Android. Every call I ever have about Android is not about the newest hotness. No one asks about the Nexus 4. They want to talk to me at Android 2.3, and many clients and other investors, those kind of people, resist going for the newer hardware. A quad core is going to be fine.
Yeah, so I have this client that I just spent only 2 days with, and they were doing web testing, and they were intentionally buying. This was not my idea. They were intentionally buying the worst Android devices they could off of eBay and testing on those.
I have my HTC Aris. It is the most awful phone I've ever used, and that is my test device for 90% of what I do.
I'm looking at the games that are already confirmed for the Ouya. So Shadowrun Online's on here.
I think Final Fantasy, I want to say 3? What is it, 4?
Final Fantasy 3 is on here.
Okay.
Yep. So there's some interesting stuff about, 20, 30 games maybe so far. And then they also have already a Super Nintendo emulator and a Super 64 emulator. XBMC. Oh, shite. Now we're talking. You put XBMC on the Ouya, and
isn't that a cute little media server?
If that thing could play MKVs and things like that. Oh, they're also doing Twitch.tv live streaming, and so this might be. So it sounds like it'll be able to do live streaming too.
And I have a feeling they'll have a chat with Netflix, and they already have a relationship with Amazon. So how hard could it be to get the Amazon video on there? I mean, I think you're seriously underselling this device.
It does say TBA on the release date, but the fact that it's, I don't know.
Well,
you could be right.
The primary focus is games, so all this media stuff is probably going to be a secondary concern.
It's funny because if they're successful, they become Valve's competitor with the Steam Box. Because they're kind of going after that same market that I think Valve is going to go after with the Steam Box. Indie game sales on the TV.
Yeah, I think Valve does do a lot for indie games, but still their strongest market, and I don't know this for a fact, but it seems that way, is still mainstream AAA publishers or even AA publishers.
I don't think you're looking at the Steam Box. I think you should look at the Steam Box the way you look at the Ouya. It's going to bring new developers to the Steam platform that are going to write controller-based games like The Cave and things like that.
Maybe. I mean, I think the Steam Box is also a good bet. Additionally, remember, the Ouya and the Steam Box are far more liberal than a lot of other devices to develop for.
That's, again, why I think they're kind of competitors.
Exactly, but don't you think by the time both of these launch, there will be a middleware that you hit a button and it builds for both, just like Unity does for iOS and Android?
I don't know. Well, maybe. Yeah. I suppose that depends.
I think the real fear for both Steam and Ouya is if Microsoft and Sony wake up and stop being jerks about the way they do XBLA and PSN, and stop requiring a $40,000 update fee, and stop treating little publishers like Activision and Sega and whatever big publisher you want to name, this will seriously hurt these two devices.
What I wonder is if maybe we're focusing too much on games. If the Ouya is going to allow other types of applications, could there be other types of apps that people want to buy on a console like this? Like, could there be, I mean, obviously XBMC is one of them. Is there other stuff? Could this open up a marketplace for more than just games, or do you think that's just what they're going to focus on?
I think, the Ouya team is very smart. I don't know how closely you follow them, Chris, but they're not over ambitious. I mean, they're very ambitious, but they're not crazy. I think for the initial 6 months, it's going to be all about games. And then after that, media. And any other applications, maybe not.
Interesting. And then I bet we'll have Apple jump into this space, and then Steam jumps into this space. Then you have the new game consoles. This year really could be kind of big for, as ridiculous as it sounds, apps on TV could actually be really about to blow up.
I mean, the biggest question mark is not even Apple.
I think Apple's are guaranteed with the Apple TV.
I think they're going to be slower than you'd think.
They already have been.
Yeah, they should have done this a year ago, and there would be no Ouya.
Exactly.
And there would be there'd probably still be a Steam Box, but it would be a much less certain thing.
Though, honestly, their methodology is usually to wait and let people ship first-gen products, and then they come out and show everybody, look what we can do instead.
But think about it from an indie developer. If Microsoft and Sony loosen up a bit, wouldn't you rather say, and my game was on the Xbox Marketplace or the Sony network or the PlayStation network? Apologies, rather than this third-party thing. No, I love the Ouya. Obviously, I'm very seriously
Right. Yeah.
supporting it.
So where are you shipping? Oh, on the Ouya market versus
Western Ouya,
Right. Right.
But if but you tell, oh, the Xbox, why is there? Okay, so Smash Raider, why there's no Wii U left? Because I'm not paying that much money for a Wii U. That thing needs a price drop.
Mm.
It's just not a good investment. I'd
Yeah.
rather buy an iPad
They probably will drop the price.
or a Nexus 10. All right, we should move on though, because we already killed half the show arguing about the Ouya.
Okay. I just think it's funny that we both have pre-ordered one. So I guess we'll share our thoughts when they ship.
I've pre-ordered two.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And I spent a lot of time with it. Silly SDK. All right, so Rails security check. Now, before we start, I don't hate Rails, so please send your hate mail to, you know what, send it to unfiltered@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Give those bastards a taste of the medicine. All right, so let's talk about mass assignment, Chris. Now, this little ditty hit GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
This was a problem. Guess whose fault it was?
Whose?
Not Rails's.
Okay.
So, and we're not going to go too deep into the issue, but basically, everyone could have avoided this issue by either whitelisting or blacklisting their properties, instead of leaving everything nice and open and letting the Rails magic do it for you. I've linked the official Rails issue to this, and you can all read it. It's interesting to see the different philosophies. The one I ended up going with was the whitelist way, so a little more restrictive, and it turned out not to be the one that people ended up preferring. Basically, you whitelist properties that can be written to, etc. No need to go into detail for folks who aren't Rails devs. This is just an interesting case of the platform got blamed for developer laziness, kind of like the other week where GitHub got blamed for jackasses putting their password. Sorry, Barack.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't ready.
Next time.
Hello, everybody.
No, that's not what you were looking for, but
no. For jackasses putting their passwords in their GitHub repos.
He's a jackass.
Thank you, Barack. Stay tuned.
There you go. Barack's
this issue
now.
Was kind of a oh my god situation. It's resolved. It's an old issue. I'm not going to go into too much details. But basically, not inherent in Rails, caused by sloppy, in quotes, developers. We'll get back to the whole magic issue. Next point, YAML. So, Chris, do you know what YAML is? If you look at the comment on the doc, you'll know.
I do know what YAML is. I also have a Wikipedia page here for it.
Yes.
YAML is a data serialization format, Mr. Dominic.
Yes, I can't imagine where you found that.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No way.
So, YAML really sounded like a good idea. Turns out that deserializing YAML is incredibly dangerous and insecure.
Oh.
So why is this important? Well, so it turns out Rails allows you to embed YAML in your XML. Whoops. Additionally, if you're using JSON, it uses YAML to deserialize JSON. Whoops. Case in point, every Rails app was vulnerable to this YAML issue. That's not good.
No.
Because this is something that, I mean, you could interfere, and obviously Rails is open source, and there are things you could have done to prevent this, but this was an automatic thing that happened. So by default, you are vulnerable to this issue. Now, this issue is the biggie.
Yeah.
Because it allowed anyone, including, me, to execute arbitrary code on your application.
Wow.
Yep. So, whoops.
That seems really, really major.
Yeah, that was the Rails apocalypse one. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, because the mass assignment bug, you know what? Yes, a lot of people, including GitHub, had the issue and didn't realize it. But, the plausible deniability of, well, you should have, whitelisted or blacklisted or done some other kind of security check. Fine. The YAML thing was, whoops, built in, automatic. Sorry, Charlie. Like you were sunk before you started. You can imagine how sending those emails out was. The only solution to the YAML thing was patch your shit.
Right.
So nothing like an unscheduled upgrade.
Emergency. Did you call everybody and say I have to charge you an emergency repair rate? Your
Lots of unhappy folks on that one.
it's
So
it's a marketing opportunity, Mr. Dominic.
actually, it's worked for Microsoft for years.
Yeah, yeah.
I should rethink my whole strategy.
You
for
should.
this
You know what you
year.
got to do is just always deploy Rails applications and then just build in an
No,
emergency
I'm just gonna
patch.
stick with like Rails 2.0. Just gonna go all the way back. No. So there's a great blog post called "What the Rails Security Issue Means to Your Startup."
Oh, okay.
I forgot the author's name because I can't remember names for my life. Basically, it goes into details about what these last two biggest issues have meant.
His first name's Patrick.
His first name's Patrick, and how it might affect you. I have to say, he uses some, he's very blunt about it, but it's not at all like fuddy. It's not like, oh my God, Rails is blowing up. Use ASP.NET. Thanks, bye. It's very, this is a problem. Patch your shit. Fix the holes. Do a security audit. You can't ignore this, which is true. And so there's been a lot of backlash, right? The folks who don't like Rails have been like, haha, Rails, blah, 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 all these problems.
Yeah, of course. This is an opportunity to jump on.
Right. But let's get down to the bottom line and try and parse out the FUD. Most of these issues were around for a while, especially the YAML one. The problem is that a lot of folks using Rails are relying on the magic of Rails too much, the abstraction. So they don't know what's going on. That's not great, right? Because Rails is kind of, really easy to get started, really easy to do a simple site, really fast to develop, and you don't really need to peek under the covers. And a lot of developers did that.
You can just kind of be blissfully ignorant.
Blissfully ignorant until something horrible happens.
Right.
And unfortunately, that happened to a lot of folks. So this, in a lot of ways, could turn into an argument for why super high abstraction is bad. Because
yeah.
I think it's pretty hard to go more abstract than Rails.
This is, and in parlance, this would be in the sysadmin world. There's a lot of tools that will scripts to automatically set up your web server, and we always cringe when we hear about those because they often leave security configuration issues, and you're just kind of blissfully unaware. Everything's working, your web server's taking web requests, but for all you know, MySQL is accepting connections from anybody on the internet, for example, or something like that.
Right. I mean, this YAML issue in particular was kind of a shot across the bow that a lot of people, I would say most people, myself included, didn't see coming. It was quite the shakeup. So for me, and I think for a lot of other developers, it's kind of brought a certain philosophy into question. Because even if you listen to old Coder radios, I've always made the argument that abstraction's good because fast development is ultimately more important than, reinventing the wheel.
Shipping. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is if you don't know what the hell's going on under the hood, so to speak. I mean, it's really, really hard to overstate how bad the YAML issue was.
In some ways, maybe I'm reaching here, but it seems like it kind of goes back to our platform conversation where if, in your case with CodeJournal and how you were dependent on GitHub, and when GitHub went down, users thought your app was broken. Is depending on abstraction like this in some ways equivalent to that, where you're kind of just depending on somebody else to take care of some of the technology for you, and unless you fully understand what's going on there, you can be vulnerable in whatever way that means. Maybe it's vulnerable in terms of a service outage. Maybe it's vulnerable in terms of a security issue. Do you think maybe that's something there? You just kind of have to know it top to bottom what you're doing. You have to own it top to bottom in a way.
I'd say that's true, but this is a much worse case than the GitHub issue, right? Because the issue with GitHub being down, you saw at the time it was just an infinite spinner, and now it's been patched, so you see a pop-up error. With this, there was a very serious risk that someone could be executing arbitrary code on something you built or something you were responsible for maintaining without you knowing.
Right, and then you have to wonder, is the client going to come to you and say, well, what the hell? You made this app for us, and now they've broken into our database or whatever it is?
Or if the data is sensitive, is the client's lawyer going to come to you and say, I'll see you in court? I mean, there are some implications here. If the data was medical or, now granted, if you were following HIPAA, you should have been okay. But banking and some people don't always follow the guidelines. You hear about that stuff on ours every couple of months.
Or you can just have situations where your client has a contract with their customer that it's an NDA, or maybe it's dealing with something that's private. It could be, and then anything that gives them reason to go after you. It doesn't have to be something as major as a HIPAA violation. It can be you violated a contract.
Even less serious than a contract breach. I've worked on apps that are aimed towards children. It may not be a crime, or you may not be in legal jeopardy for having your data, infected, so to speak, or subject to attacks. But certainly, if you're targeting children and your customer is the parent, they're a very security conscious set of the market. That's enough reason for them to walk away.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been lucky that I haven't actually suffered from any of these issues because I'm obsessive about reading things, and I literally, the day this came out, I patch.
That's good.
Yeah, and I do full audits, which is something, if you're not doing security audits, it's good. It's better if you can hire a professional security consultant to do it for you. But even, once a month, once a week, you should look over yourself if you have time. Because you never know, that old Rails app that's been sitting in the corner somewhere is now a ticking time bomb.
Gosh, that's just so much harder to do than actually say, especially when you build something and you move on to a new project and you're busy and you're focused and it's just so hard sometimes, especially like if you're in a crunch time.
Oh, for sure. And this isn't a new concept, right? I mean, how many times has PHP and Java been exploited?
Right. Or any server-side service or something like that. Yeah.
It's
weekly. I mean, that's why TechSnap exists.
And honestly, a lot of the issue with these Rails exploits is it's kind of like when the Mac started getting more viruses last year.
Yeah.
They didn't think it could happen to them. I mean, and PHP is a bigger target, so you figure they'll go for, but you can't live that blindly. If you're running a Rails 2 app when you patch to 3, and yes, it is going to be a pain in the ass because it's going to break some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the problem is that you do this and it could break your app.
Yeah, and your employer or client is not going to want to hear it, but you need to lay out the security concerns because, I mean, I'm sure Chris could tell you, the ability to execute arbitrary code on someone's server means they can literally do anything.
Yeah, and they could run commands as that user. And that's the main principle of breaking a system is you get in that way and then you hop
and don't run your app as root.
Well, no. I'm hoping it's a web user or something like that.
Or like app or, don't run as root.
Don't give them a shell. Don't give them shell. You don't need to give them shell.
You don't need to give them anything. Just run it. As a normal user, just please. I've seen too many people running their apps just as root. Oh, because it's easy.
Everybody just needs to go on Scale Engine, and Alan will put it in a jail for you, and everybody will just be happy. You just keep it contained. Contain it.
Quarantined in this case.
And there is a lot of different angles to this. There is a very difficult position it puts you in as a client. With your client's relationship, there's a difficult position it puts you in time scheduling. And then there's the problem of, if you're kind of new to this business, you don't always necessarily have the foresight to work out future updates on maybe some of the things you're writing for people.
And that's why this was so devastating, because Rails was attractive to a lot of, let's say,
newbies,
more junior developers, because it was so freaking easy to get a basic thing set up.
Right.
Now, if you did some more advanced stuff, it got hard. But if you were just setting up a simple company blog for someone or a very simple REST API, Rails was a no-brainer because it was fast, easy, and did a lot of it out of the box.
Right. And it's popular.
Yeah, it's fairly popular with a certain set, but it's let's be fair though. Most platforms have severe security issues, and some of them probably haven't been caught yet and are being exploited right now. Let's be honest. There's if you listen to TechSnap, there's that whole company that sells security exploits.
Yeah, well, there's several. Yeah,
there's several. So my point is not to say run away from Rails because it's insecure. It's if you were using Rails because you didn't have to worry about what the hell was going on, run away from Rails and do something else, or learn what's under the hood in Rails. Right? Understand what those default settings are. Understand what YAML is and how it works and how it could be a flaw that you need to patch.
Ladies and gentlemen, on February 11th, 2013, Michael Dominic moves away from Ruby on Rails?
I have, and I've moved on to another a technology known for its security,
Oh,
Java.
Yeah? Hey-oh!
I'm actually not kidding.
Oh, man.
He's a jackass.
Hey.
Hey, Obama calls it like he sees it.
Hello, everybody.
So, no, so that's probably a discussion for next week. I would also argue, whenever I've shipped Rails on a company that's a little more enterprisey, it's always been hard to sell them on Rails.
Really?
Yes, because it's not Java or C#. It's really easy to sell people on Java and C#. Additionally, even before some of these more heinous issues, I've been working on a project that has not been in Rails. I don't want to go too much into detail, but obviously every project has a budget, and Ruby is not known for its good use of memory. Not to be fair, neither is Java.
Huh.
Java, there's a number of papers you can Google for them. It's supposedly faster. It's visibly faster once it gets running. So there's that initial start the VM phase. Now, the framework I'm using is called Java Play, which aims to be a lot like Rails.
You've actually you've dropped a few hints about Java Play in the last couple of episodes. I've been wondering if you'd bring this up. I have not heard of Java Play, and I don't follow this very closely.
So they've actually reached their 2.0. The current version is 2.1.0.
Is it called Play Framework?
I think it's just type in Java Play. Yeah.
That's what I got. That's what I did, and I got playframework.com. Does that sound right?
The site's green.
Yeah, it's very green. A lot of green on this site. Here, I'll put it up on the stream. You tell me if I got the right one. Yeah, this is it. Because, it says getting started with Java. Yeah, this is it.
So as Disco in the chat mentions, it is aimed at Scala developers, but it supports Java and Scala.
Okay.
So if you're not a big fan of Scala, you can just use it with Java and never touch Scala, but for a few small things. It's a nice framework. It's Java, so it's easy to sell. Additionally, if I need help, and when I do, it's very easy to bring someone on to help, right? At a perhaps more affordable rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it does have some of the niceties that Rails had, which also means it has some of the risk, because there's a good deal of abstraction going on here. So you need to be a little careful. If you're a Java developer and you're not too hot on this, you could take a look at Java Spring. That seems to be a more popular alternative. So far, so good with Java Play, though. It's very familiar to Rails. Very, very familiar. And to be honest, a lot of it, too, is the defaults I feel in Java Play are more reasonable and less, how do we say, hipstery than Rails. Like, no coffee scripts, please. One really nice thing is it comes built in with its own web server, and you don't have to do that kind of configuration.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
So I'm liking it so far. I have been doing quite a lot of reading and research on what's going on under the hood, because if you're using any tool like this, it's it's a good idea. But it's been good so far. Now, this project was originally done or demoed or prototyped, if you will, in ASP.NET. And the reason I moved off of ASP.NET is you do the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year thing.
Doing the math on it?
Yeah, eventually the cost, if I ever had to go to physical hardware of SQL Server and
thousands
Windows Server,
especially if you want multiple cores and things like that,
it would change the whole business model.
Oh yeah,
and it would make it kind of a gross business model. So open source was a necessary thing, and to be honest, I like open source anyway. So I prefer to run my stuff on Linux if I can. So feel free, Rails fans, to troll me for moving from Rails to what is effectively Java Rails.
What makes you more confident in something like Java Play?
So I started this project before a lot of the YAML issue in particular. So it wasn't really the security stuff that pushed me away from Rails. It was some of the performance stuff. And Rails has a hard time scaling.
SQL, SQL, they hate it when we do that. I'm reading the chat room right now, sorry. Rails has a hard time scaling. Go on.
Right. And I'm not sure if this project will need to scale. And, I would say even a bigger factor is it's really easy to get some part-time help for Java.
Yeah.
and to get it at a very affordable rate because you can, kind of have a mentor university student, mentor mentee kind of thing.
I mean, to be honest, it sounds like you want something easy like Ruby, but you just don't want Ruby on Rails, is what it is. You want something easy and it'll do this for you, but you want something you can also trust at the same time, and maybe because it has.
Well, I don't. So you should never inherently trust a framework. There's going to be security problems, and you're going to always have to.
But you have to have some peace of mind. You got to have a little peace of mind with it. Something you got to at least be able to have some confidence in.
And then the scalability thing, probably never going to need Twitter scale. So there's definitely concerns, and a lot of people in chat are going nuts because Java has had some problems recently. Yeah. So with any tool, you're going to have to patch your shit, basically, right?
That's what they tell me.
The question was, first of all, by following some basic practices, you can avoid a lot of these issues. Don't run as root. I mean, if you're running as root, no matter what tool you're using, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Additionally, I just don't care for Rails anymore. A lot of it's preference, to be honest. For the last year, every time I've spun up a Rails app, I had to change the defaults because I don't like the way they're going with a lot of things. With Play, I don't really have to do that. I mean, my database preferences are different from how they ship, so I did have to change that. But I had to do that with Rails anyway. So
fair enough.
And we can go into a much deeper discussion about Play, probably when this thing ships.
That'd be cool. I'd be really curious because I really haven't heard much about it.
No, you haven't, and it's actually running on Linux, and it's running on the OpenJDK.
I like all that.
So fun fact, I'm developing on the Oracle JDK and running on the OpenJDK. Yeah, don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
There's some differences.
Yeah. They're trying.
They're trying, and so the reason I went with the OpenJDK is a very practical one of I can apt-get OpenJDK and keep it updated easily.
Yep. Same reason I do.
Oracle one, not so much.
You gotta go to their super awful, horrible site and then download it and go through their clunky installer. It's awful. It's so much easier to get it from the repo.
Yeah, and I just want to hit this point again. My main argument is not about scale, right? You can scale Rails. It's a pain in the ass, but you can do it. I'm sure scaling Java Play is going to be an epic pain in the ass because it has a similar philosophy. And scale is kind of a fallacy. People who worry about scale before they ship are Barack.
Oh, they are. Sorry, I was in the chat room.
He's a jackass.
Thank you. And a lot of it's preference. And, there comes a point where, especially with these open source tools, they evolve. Sometimes they might evolve away from the way you prefer to work. And that's okay. For a great example, I think I have in length discussed why I don't like CoffeeScript. Rails defaults to CoffeeScript. Yes, you can turn it off. But it got to the point where how many preferences did I need to change every time I did, Rails new? It was just, and if you're not running on the mainstream, on what everybody else is doing, on what the maintainers are worried about keeping secure.
You start to feel, too, like they're trying to tell you, don't do it this way. We're leaving this option in here for you stragglers. They're
trying to push you into this world. And the arguments made, obviously DHH is very smart. There are good arguments for what they're doing, and they make sense. I just don't like the idea of some of it. And maybe in a year, I will have changed my mind. And maybe I'll say, in particular about the CoffeeScript thing, maybe I will one day say, you're right, JavaScript should be assembly. Forget about this crap. Right now, I'm not terribly comfortable with that because I feel like it's yet another layer of abstraction that's... I don't see the value in that abstraction.
Right.
And to me, abstraction...
Is it just about approachability? Is it just about making it easier?
The CoffeeScript thing?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the legitimate reason to use CoffeeScript is it's, quote, easier to write than JavaScript. There's a lot of also folks who don't like it JavaScript aesthetically. But for me, if you embrace the functional side of JavaScript, you can really... It's fine. So, and I may change my mind. Obviously, I changed my mind about Rails. So, I mean, there's a lot of things going into play. I've also dragged my feet on the NoSQL thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's
a big change.
Now, that's not the default in Rails, but there's definitely an eye to it. And even on the ASP side, there's an eye to They have now A&A Rahim's RavenDB. There's a lot of interest in that area, and I'm not sold yet. I'm clinging to Postgres with my life.
Postgres is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've been off the MySQL bandwagon for a long time. In fact, I was never really on it. So it's, and I understand because I'm already, expecting the emails about why Rails is wonderful. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that there are these issues that you need to be aware of, just like any other technology. And the direction it's going isn't quite right for me. And I'm suggesting that if you felt the same way, maybe your next project you do want to spin up in it doesn't have to be a Java play. It could be Django for all our Python fans. No, seriously, whatever you're more comfortable working with. Or if you still like Ruby and you don't really like Rails, check out Padrino or Sinatra.
Oh.
Right. They have epic names, and I've done a little Sinatra work. It's very nice. Now, Sinatra is interesting, Chris, because it's much less abstract than Rails and is much more down to the metal. So if you're doing something small and simple, you really get to feel what you're doing more.
So it's a little more reasonable. I mean, if you're saying remove abstraction, but it's not like it's totally
it's still Ruby, but
yeah,
it's and that's not to say I probably would throw up a Sinatra site for a product page or whatever.
Sinatra, I'm gonna look that up. That looks really cool.
It is pretty cool. I just don't feel like getting the 50 emails that say I hate Ruby. If you were to somehow break into my source control, you'd see that almost all of my scripts are written in Ruby.
I like their slogan, put this in your pipe and smoke it.
Yes. You know what, Chris, when I'm deciding on a tool, what's their logo? What's their slogan?
They got Sinatra as the logo. I mean, that's a winner right there, but put this in your pipe and smoke it.
I'm just like git pull Sinatra, git pull Sinatra, git push whatever. Listening to New York. It's just the way to go. You get a nice fedora, running on Fedora.
That would be the perfect time to play a little Sinatra music while you're getting set up.
I think that's the way to go. And if I wasn't so sure that this episode would get a DMCA takedown, I would pop open Spotify and play New York.
I know. Trust me. I mean, it is crossing my mind. I do have it on.
They will take it down. You won't even hit play, and the notice will already be in the mail. Yeah.
I know. It's actually been a real problem lately.
Right. And Disco's correctly pointing out it's a micro framework. You're correct. I'd argue that the folks who've had all these problems with Rails don't know what the hell the difference is. Because if they, and I don't, that's the other thing that's been bothering me. In a lot of these security posts about Rails, a lot of folks have been really, really negative on the people who've been vulnerable. So the YAML thing was everybody, but the mass assignment thing wasn't. But come on, right? I mean, there's no need for that. Part of the point of picking a very abstract tool was not to have to take the time to check everything.
That's actually, yeah, that's kind of true, isn't it?
It's a bad practice, but it's reality.
Yeah.
So get off your high horse. I'm relatively sure most of the people being critical of those other developers did it themselves, but we're a little more in the know with the blogs and the podcasts and kind of just patched it faster.
Well, and I don't know. That might be a justifiable approach. If you are willing to be committed to just staying up front of things, willing to patch fast and fix quick, then maybe that's essentially what Twitter is willing to do.
Well, since I've been using Play, I've joined the Play mailing list. I don't participate, but I just kind of watch.
Keeping an eye on it, seeing if there's something you need to worry about.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's good to just keep an ear to the ground if you're using anything like this. And with open source, it's easy. It's not like there's some company who's going to hide the issue for 3 months until they fix it.
This is one of the points that I make often when people say, what's the advantage of using open source over a commercial package? And I'll say, right. If you want to base something on it and you want to watch what's going on at the very ground level, open source gives you that level of transparency. That's why it's great for this infrastructure stuff like this.
Yeah, it's really... Not to mention that hosting open source servers, Linux servers, or BSD servers even is hell of a lot cheaper.
And easier, to be honest. There's just less you have to worry about once they're set.
Yeah, so this is kind of off topic. Maybe we can talk about it next week. But the ASP stuff started off about the same price. But as it went up, there was a point where it jumped. And a lot of that had to do with not Windows Server, but with SQL Server.
Yeah, Microsoft's new strategy is actually to give Windows Server away relatively for a decent price.
Well, also MSDN, I have it for nothing. But
okay, well,
yeah. But the problem is SQL Server I have for nothing for a limited time, and just a version of it. So it's a little. always evaluate if this is going to be good in 3 years and if your business model can support it. So,
amen,
right.
brother. That's solid.
So please send your hate mail to unfiltered@jupiterbroadcasting.com. And Java fans, I don't want to hear about it. You got a whole episode. Okay?
You got a whole episode.
All right, so
Tool of the week?
another Java tool.
What? What's it called?
Oh, I just got this myself. IntelliJ 12. It is the newest Java IDE from JetBrains. It has Play support built in. It has Scala support built in.
Oh, very nice.
It is really expensive.
Oh.
But if you're an open source developer, you can apply for a free license for a year.
Oh, really? Free license for a year?
And there's a free community open source edition that has most of the tooling, but not a few things.
Man, everybody's websites are getting so fancy these days.
Yeah, and it also has Android support, including a UI layout tool.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Dominic.
Go ahead.
Is this only for the Macintosh platform?
This is for the Linux, Mac, and Windows platforms.
Well, isn't that just extra special?
Indeed.
And other platforms. Very cool. So, do you remember the price, did you say?
Not cheap.
Supports plugins, very nice.
So
they have the community edition, which is free.
Which is free. Then there's a student edition if you're a student, which is cheaper. There's a pro edition, and then there's a bunch of enterprise licenses. I think the pro edition is like $300 or $400.
Huh. Yeah, okay. So I'll look at here. You know what? I'll click on buy. I'll tell you what they say. Okay, so personal licenses, yeah, $199. If you're a student, you get it for $99.
Yeah, $200. Yeah.
Classroom, they get it for free. Open source project for free. Commercial license to make a commercial app. Well, then you start getting a little more expensive.
And I can tell you from experience, JetBrains is really liberal with their open source licenses. And I don't know this for a fact, but it sometimes it feels like they'll kind of give it to you if you bother to email them. It kind of as well because it expires in a year. So I think it's like like they figure you'll pay for it in a year.
All right. Well, absolutely. So what's it called again? Give it the name.
IntelliJ.
IntelliJ, and we have a link to that in the show notes. All right, Mr. Dominic. Well, good show. Good show. Any other things you want to cover before we wrap up?
That's it. GoPod Go Journal.
Go Journal? Code Journal.
Go Journal. It's a new Code Journal. Sorry about that.
And I'm going to put a link to for the Ouya in the show notes, so if folks want to pre-order the Ouya and support the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, we'll have that in there too. I mean, why not, right? I mean, we're gonna get it. We're gonna be talking about it. You know, you guys out there are gonna want one. I'm just saying. All right, Mr. Dominic, well, your dog's calling because it's time to go for a walk.
Yes, let me run it. Hopefully it's FedEx.
Okay. All right, well, everyone join us live next week over at jblive.tv Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, or jblive.info for the audio stream. And you can find Mr. Dominic's Twitter and his blog in our show notes over at jupiterbroadcasting.com, as well as my contact information. Email the show, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, and download us Monday afternoons. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Coder Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.